Welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I'm delighted to be joined on this occasion by Scott McIntosh. How is it going, Scott?
Yeah, very well. Nice to actually be coming on this season at a stage where we can actually sound a bit positive and look forward to the next match.
Yeah, absolutely. The last two reaction videos I've done with Craig last night and then St Mirren, I just came away from it. It's like I've probably been too giddy. I've probably been too excitable, and I'm the type of, you know how you got like managers who are like, they always talk about not getting don't don't get too low when you lose, don't get too high when you win. I'm kind of like, when we lose, I'm not the type of person to get really low, but when Hearts win, I'm a type of person to get overly excited, very high. So yeah, haven't reined myself in, but you may as well enjoy it because after that start to the season, it's just nice to be talking about Hearts in a positive fashion, like you said. We are going to mainly preview the Hibs game. Scott and I, just because Craig and I did a reaction video last night about the win over Omonia Nicosia, and Scott did likewise on Scarfs Around the Funnel, which was an excellent listen. Again, they're always so much more enjoyable to listen to when it's yourself, Laurie, and Mark being very happy about things. So rather than get into the details last night, I thought I would just kind of pepper you with questions and get a wee temperature check on what you thought of Neil Critchley over the last couple of games and his appointment. But before we get to that, message from our sponsors, Good Vibes Giveaways, who are proud to sponsor Hearts Standard and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even OASIS tickets. Get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com and enter for your chance to spread the good vibes. So, Scott, 2 games into Neil Critchley's reign. 4-0 win over St Mirren, 2-0 win over Omonia Nicosia, on the cusp of qualifying for group stage knockout football for the first time in how old am I? 30 years, over nearly 35 years or 36 years, and we go into Derby on a high. What's been your biggest takeaway? I know it's a very small sample size. What's been your biggest takeaway from the last 2 games?
I think it's been the fact that he's not wanted to come in and reinvent the wheel, and he's not tried to do that, which you can see a lot of managers will attempt to do even mid-season. I think Daniel Stendhal is a really good example as someone who had a core philosophy which he wanted to imprint on a team regardless of whether he had the right tools in place at that point or not. I think what Neil Critchley's done well, which was very sensible, is he's came in, he's brought Liam Fox into the fold, or he's kept him in the fold off the back of doing so well in the 3 previous matches. And I think what he's done is basically allowed the players to express themselves a little bit, and he's probably kept the tactical and system side to the game to a minimum. You know, it's been focusing on how hard can we work, how difficult can we make it for our opponents in that high press, and then just sort of, like I say, just keeping other things fairly basic. But what that's done is it's allowed certain players who were maybe not fully on board with the message from Stephen Naismith, or maybe, you know, at best, they were maybe a little bit confused by what he was wanting to do week to week. I think they've probably embraced the simplicity of what Critchley's wanted to do. And I think they've just been concentrating on their own game. And naturally, you've seen improved performances from the majority because of that.
Yeah. I think that's going back to. I think I've said it so many times. People will be bored of me saying so, and I've put it in a few articles I've written that one of the things that stood out for me when he was unveiled, he talked about simplicity is genius, and that he was, and just like you said, he was going to come in and it was try and get straightforward, because you're not coming in with loads of time to work with the players. You're coming in and you need to get your message across quickly. So then just make sure your message is clear and concise, and that it's easy to understand. And I think you can actually see that in his press conferences. I thought on his unveiling, I thought not that he was timid or tame, but I thought he maybe took I think he kind of grew. He's kind of grown into the fact that there's more media demands from him than his previous jobs, and he just seems he's like okay, this is what it is. And he seems so much more comfortable. And I think his message in the media to fans, you talk about what his message to the players is and keeping it simple. His message to the fans and everything he said, he said a lot of the right things. It's been clear. It's not been over the top. It's not been bombastic. It's just been realistic and a lot of things that Hearts fans want to hear. But he's backed that up with what he said, and it's backed up on the pitch. And I really enjoyed last night. I asked him about the change in formation, and sometimes managers would maybe not want to get into the nitty gritty side of things. And then he just explained it. And it was like it was quite tactical, but he explained it in a way that was really easy to understand. And I think that's been the case for basically everything he said. I think which makes fans easier to get on board, because if they're understanding what the manager's saying.
Yeah, I think there is a general sense that he's sort of aura and his demeanor. I do think that when things may go awry, I think the fact that he is quite, I wouldn't say aloof is the right word, but I don't think he is an individual who gets too high and too low when he does post-match interviews. And I think because of that may go against him, when there is the inevitable sort of loss of form or the odd defeat here or there. I think that's something that potentially, some fans might hold against him then. But for me, I've never had an issue with that. I like that about Stephen Naismith. I felt Stephen Naismith was never too high, never too low. Yep, there was maybe aspects a bit around the context of the discussion that maybe would frustrate me, but generally his demeanour was always something that I was quite on board with. And like you say, last night, it was great to hear him talk about, it wasn't so much that he talked about what Nicosia were doing that was going to worry him. It was about finding a different way of playing round them. And that's what I quite liked about him explaining his tweak in the formation last night. It wasn't so much a reaction to the arsenal or the weapons that the opposition have, which is what I think previous managers have been quite consumed by at times. And that's how they've sometimes maybe second guessed themselves and sometimes made too many changes week to week. But his tweak, he explained it. He wanted to still be able to maybe use the width, particularly with Forrester. So it was a case of maybe bringing Vargas out wide, but Vargas was still going and sort of drawn in centrally to Shankland, which was offering that space to Forrester, particularly in the first half. So I think he explained himself well. And when you heard him talk, you're like, yeah, that is how the game panned out. So I can get on board with that. So again, I think the buy-in from the fans equally as the players has probably been quite easy because he's not tried to overcomplicate it or make too many changes too quickly.
And just before we move on to the derby, how are you feeling in general about the appointment? I know it was one that prompted a lot of debate and discussion. I think, if I remember correctly from listening to Scarcer in the Funnel and just seeing you on Twitter, you weren't either kind of what was it you said? You weren't overwhelmed, you weren't underwhelmed, you were just whelmed.
I think that was the best way to put it. Just being whelmed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the public fallout leading up to Critchley's appointment didn't help. And I think we were all not all, but I think there was a lot of fans that were probably wanting to know exactly what was going on in terms of the process. But I think once the club came out, made it very clear that Critchley was the number one choice of the analytics, I think then some fans started to sort of, everyone's kind of used that sort of buzzword about, trusting the process, so to speak. And I think that's something they do need to look at, look at how Brighton have sort of managed managerial recruitment over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. And I think it's something we've got to try and get on board with. We've got to understand that what we maybe don't see on the surface with Critchley, there's things in the background that maybe other fans or other clubs would hold against them that the Jamestown analytics actually see as a positive. So it's about, trusting that process that they've found something that isn't, obvious to you or I. And I think that's something that fans might, start to, obviously it's easier to get on board with that if the results continue the way they have been over the last week. But I'm quite content with what I've seen so far. I think the improvement player to player has been good, but I have sort of tried to temper that by saying I think there was already a start with that under Liam Fox. I do think certain players were looking like themselves. I think Shankland, I think, Blair Spittle and that were starting to come into their own sort of during the last couple of games prior to Critchley coming in. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. But like I say, Critchley's came in and he's not tried to do too much too soon. And I think that certainly helped. I think the biggest challenge is on its way, not just with Sunday, but I think over the next few weeks, it's whether he maintains that sort of ethos, or whether he maybe does try to incorporate little tweaks game to game, because he was well known for that at Blackpool. So that's probably where there's going to be a bit more of a challenge, and we're going to find out a little bit more about what he can offer us long term.
Yeah, and absolutely, and like on the players, you just get, I think you get that naturally. And when a manager leaves, that there's something, there's usually just an uptick in form, and people have a spell where they're looking better, they're feeling better, and then it's trying to maintain that. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next couple of weeks with the hectic schedule, and then further on.
Yeah, I do think naturally as well. And look, this isn't a party football that I really enjoy, but I think it's only fair that you understand the realism that I think players now start to understand points in the season in which they can outlast a manager. And if they're not really fully on board with the message, they maybe won't go that extra sort of 5-10% to get on board with it. They'll maybe think, you know what, he's not playing me now, but 2 or 3 weeks he'll be away. So I do think now, because of how intense it can be, you've got, we'll talk about it week to week. You've got the podcast, you've got the social media. I think because it's so heavily sort of scrutinised, I do think players pick up on that sort of vibe and that mood music. And I do think now it's really hard for managers once that sort of train starts. It's very hard to to stop it. So I do think there's an element of that players just naturally come onto a game, because they're now starting to think, oh, this guy's just through the door. You don't know how long he's going to be here. I'm out of contract at the end of the season. I'm going to have to start to, and it's not all with intent, malicious intent. Some of it can just be subconscious. So I think that's where the manager bounce tends to come from, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, players are human, and emotions, like they've got emotions just like everyone else. But look, kind of moving the discussion on to Sunday, when Critchley came in, I think I certainly talked about it as these first 3 games are massive, in that with the reaction to his appointment, and just like how much stock Hearts fans put in the derby, especially. But you're going into the derby now where in the situation Hibs are in, all the pressure, well, certainly more pressures on Hibs to get a result, and the fact that these 2 games and the nature of the performances, that Critchley he's quickly got people on side. He's quickly got credit in the bank. That, yes, I think you mentioned it on Discussion the Funnel, that if you are a manager who loses a derby, you're going to get criticism. You're going to get criticised because Hearts fans don't want to see a derby. But I don't think it's kind of touched with this doesn't happen. But I don't think it'll be as severe if the last couple of games hadn't gone as well. That people have seen, okay, there's that's what we're trying to do. There's evidence there. I can get on board with that. And then it's about the reaction. But yeah, I think there's another great opportunity to continue that momentum. It's just the complete transformation, and like in the mood music, even just the fans coming into the derby, where I think everyone's just like confident.
Yeah, I think there's a general hubris around Hearts fans when it comes to derbies, where regardless of form, we tend to be quite confident, but we've now actually got a bit of evidence there to sort of back that hubris up with. So I think that's been really encouraging. I think fans, there's now something tangible that fans can cling on to and say, well, I'm confident for Sunday because of how we're pressing or how well we're defending, particularly from defence to midfield. I think because we've got those aspects to fall back on, it's a lot easier to feel better about Sunday without even looking to what's been happening across the city over the last couple of weeks.
And what do you... We'll talk about Hibs in a minute, because I think it's pertinent to discuss them and their issues and how that can impact the game. What do you expect from Hearts and Critchley? It's going to be more changes, and I think that's just natural. He came out in the press on... When did we speak to him? Losing track of my days, Wednesday. And he talked about the need for, if you want to play with the intensity and energy we want to play with, then you, kind of paraphrasing him here, but you have to make changes to kind of freshen up. And we've seen it last night. It worked so well with the players coming in and the not like them stepping up and not seeing the standards drop. Do you expect another kind of 3 or 4 changes where, for one, for example, I think Oyegoke will come in? I just think with his physicality and his height, I think you mentioned it last night that Hibs are a big side, and you just have I think he's a bonus for set pieces as well. Do you foresee many other changes?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm hoping I don't know what the changes are until Sunday itself. So whoever is leaking the team news recently, naughty, and let's not keep doing that. But yeah, I think they'll certainly. I think the fullback positions, that it's very clear that he's been wanting to rotate that because he sees that as a very important part of the way that we are playing just now in terms of our fullbacks offering us width. We're playing wide players that predominantly want to come in field. So yeah, I think a lot and Penrice do definitely come in. I think Benny comes in for Devlin as well. But I think that's really free. I know some fans will maybe look at Danda, but I do think he might stick with the 4-2-3-1 and he'll play Forrest and Vargas in those wide positions again. So I think I'm expecting 3 changes, and I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, I was trying to interrupt there. I was just saying, when the point you made about the fullbacks is really good because a lot is asked of them energy-wise, and I think you'll see going forward there'll be changes during the game at fullback and then from game to game as well. So all 4, 4, I'm not including Salazar in the 4 at the moment, but Kingsley, Penrice, Oyegoke and Forrester. At the moment, you're looking at it, all of them are going to get plenty of minutes. So they'll be all of them will be pretty much kept happy because they're going to get game time. But yeah, I agree with your other suggestions, talking about it in the pub after the game last night, that whether you're going Danda or Forrest, and Forrest is an interesting one because I know there's within elements of the fan base he's not rated, and I can understand the frustrations because of the way he plays at times with his head down and maybe lacks that wee bit of end product he produced last night. But I just think that no matter what manager comes into Hearts, they'll look around the squad and they'll look at Alan Forrest and think he's the type of person who will be beneficial to my squad because he can follow in, like he's really good at following instructions and he can play in different positions tactically. And I just think the Derby, I was having this conversation with a guy yesterday, that I think the Derby, you want someone like Forrest over the Danda to start with because it'll be hectic. It'll be, you kind of just essentially you want to win the battle, energy, physical first, and then maybe when it opens up later on, you can bring Danda on if you're looking for a goal or the game opens up itself. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest call, and I would like you be erring on Forrest over Danda.
Yeah, and I think as well, if you look at where Hibs can potentially hurt us as well, it is going to come down the flanks. That is where they're at their strongest. Again, depending on who they play. This is the interesting thing about Hibs. I think you can hang your hat on what Hearts will potentially do in terms of formation and personnel, but with Hibs it's really hard to say on a number of positions just now. But if they do play the likes of Boyle and Yuan ahead of the likes of Beta and Miller, they do have that threat of sort of doubling up on us, and that's something they done. If you think back to the games last season, particularly the New Year game at Easter Road, that's something they done quite well in the first half, coming down the left. Obita and that were sort of doubling up, and because we were quite narrow in midfield that night, we were really struggling to sort of cover that area. And it's not a part of the game I particularly Yandanda relishes. And I do think Alan Forrest, like you say, he takes instruction well. I think although there'll always be question marks about his overall sort of output in a game, I think that's something that managers will gravitate to because they know they can depend on him when games are all about, maybe winning that first 15, 20 minutes in terms of 50-50s and defending and not giving anything away cheaply, whereas Dan does someday a bit like Barry Mackay, who can come on and maybe turn the game with a bit of magic.
What about formation? We've obviously seen basically 4-2-2-2. last night it was a mix between 4-2-3-1 and kind of back three, just in and out of possession. Do you see, and I suppose this is, we might see it change during the game because depending on Hibs, how Hibs line up, but do you see it being more like last night where there's a wee bit of fluidity, kind of flexibility within the system rather than
Yeah, I don't think there'll
against
be.
a bit of...
Yeah, I don't think there'll be too many changes for last night in that respect, because all they'll have had time to do since last night is a bit of recovery and shape time in terms of, getting themselves set up for Sunday. So I do think it will be the back four. Yeah, there might be small changes and tweaks during the game in terms of where people are starting, in terms of their positions and that, but I do think it'll be a sort of 4-2-3-1, and again, he will ask the likes of sort of Forrest and Vargas to maybe tuck in at times to allow the likes of Penrice and Oyegoke to offer that support in the wider areas. But yeah, I think depending on what Hibs do, there may be some changes during the game, because of how Hibs not so much started the game at Tannadice but finished it. There is now obviously a bit of doubt about whether they'll stick with their 4-2-3-1, which David Gray's been quite on board with since coming in, or they might switch to the back three that they finished the game with last week.
Yeah, and just before I ask you about Hibs, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see if it's the lineup we think or kind of hope it will be. I wouldn't be surprised if Forrest and Vargas switched just because of the natural. Oyegoke's more of the type of guy who would just shuffle in at centre back, and Penrice, you want Penrice bombing up down the left rather than Oyegoke going up and down the right. With regard to Hibs, it's like you said, it's quite difficult to predict what they are going to do because of how they played against Dundee United, how it finished against Dundee United, Joe Newell's suspension, the pressure that David Gray is going to be under, and the need to get a result. How do you see Hibs setting up? Do you think they will? Again, I think weirdly, a part of it would have been easier if it was at Tynecastle. They could maybe be a bit more defensive, but they are going to be at home, so there's still that expectation to be the protagonist at Easter Road.
I think to allow them to get the sort of match winners on the pitch that they kind of need in this type of fixture, I think they will have to stick with their 4-2-3-1 as much as maybe they enjoyed a good half an hour with the back three up until Joe Newell's red card last Saturday. I do think if they want to bring Yuan in, which he hasn't had much game time recently, even coming off the bench, but in my eyes, if you're a manager under pressure, it's bad enough losing a derby, but if you lose a derby knowing that you've kept your best player on the bench, I think he'll be aware as to the added scrutiny that brings. So it's a really tough call for David Gray as to whether he sticks or twists with the Yuan situation or whether he continues to play somebody like Hoylett or Milotnikov. But I do think they'll go 4-2-3-1 because I do think that allows them to maybe get more of their danger men on the park.
I'm just looking at the comments. A big-nosed, glue-sniffing disciple says, Hibs won't be able to handle us in the opening 25 minutes. And using that as kind of jumping off point is, we talked about it in the build-up to Ammonia, in that I think you've got a team there who are low in confidence, and that if Hearts can play the way they've done from the start, especially on Thursday night, to put pressure on Hibs immediately and try and kind of make sure that they don't settle or get into any kind of flow. If you're making them make errors or putting them under pressure, that's going to feed into the crowd, and then that the kind of crowd feeling is going to feed back into the players. So I think there's a real opportunity that if Hearts when Hearts go to Easter Road, to start positively, and I would say just play very similar to the first 23 minutes they did, or try to certainly, against Ammonia.
Yeah, and that's why I think it would serve Hibs best to probably go with the 4-2-3-1, because then they can play the likes of Boyle and Yuan, and they might think they can start to ask our backline to maybe retreat a little bit and worry about playing with a higher line like we did do last night. I think starting the way that we did last night, if we were to do the same again on Sunday, I'd be really confident of getting a result, purely because I don't think Hibs have got the capability to go back to front without Kieran Bowie in their ranks. I think Kaharovic, on first glance, he's obviously quite an imposing figure, but he isn't actually someone who's very naturally talented at leading the line and playing a target man role.
Yeah.
So I do think if we were able to sort of force their centre halves, particularly Ekpiteta, on the ball and sort of shelling balls up the park, I do think that's something that Rolls and Kent would probably quite like. But again, with that knowledge of knowing that they do have pace in the wider areas that can catch us out. So there is always that little bit of balance. I don't think that was something we had to worry about as much last night, but it probably is one of the few areas where I think Hibs can genuinely hurt us if we're maybe not careful enough with the ball.
I suppose one of the last points to make is there's a real opportunity for Hearts to potentially make it a very uncomfortable afternoon for the goalkeeper, because he does not look confident against Dundee United. By all accounts, it seems like this is Joseph Bursick. By all accounts, it seems like he will start on Sunday. He is their number one, and when you've got a goalkeeper who's maybe a wee bit nervy, lacking confidence, Hearts fans will jump on that, and it's make it difficult and try and challenge him mentally. And it'll be interesting to see how he reacts, not just to that, but to his performance on last Saturday as well. So there's a real, if you're just wanting to try and put as much pressure on him early on as possible as well.
Yeah, and I think something that maybe didn't get highlighted too much from last week with regards to the mistake from Bursick for the third goal is that it's interesting from the point of view of it probably shows you a goalkeeper who doesn't have full trust in his centre halves playing ahead of him. You know, any goalkeeper that comes rushing off the line in that sort of scenario, I don't think they're doing that because it's just a rushy blood to the head. I think that comes because they have a general either lack of communication or mistrust amongst the back line. So I think that's something we can take advantage of. I think set plays will be vital, you know, both from an offensive and defensive standpoint, because I do think, again, that's an area where Hibs have actually been quite decent this season. They have looked quite well, and they do have the likes away from just the obvious of Kaharovic and their two centre-halves. Even the likes of Kwon and Triantis are quite big in stature. Liam Miller as well is quite good in the offensive end when it comes to set plays as well. So that's probably something we'll need to be aware of, because this is one of those rare times where I don't think we come into a derby with the big physical tag. I think it's probably Hibs that have that. In terms of stature, in terms of how they apply themselves in a game, still yet to be seen. I still think they've got quite a soft core to the spine of the team, and I think that's where we take an advantage. I do think we have built a decent spine to the side in the last sort of month or so, whereas yep. I think that's where Hibs, that's where their real sort of their failings come from just now. And I know a lot of fans aren't happy with Joe Newell, but I'm happy he's not playing. He's one of the few in midfield that can make things tick for them.
Yeah, I've never really bought the Joe Newell hype from Hibs fans, but I do think in a game like Sunday, I think I'm more confident seeing Kwon and Triantis in that midfield rather than Joe Newell, who's kind of got that experience over the last few years. And weirdly, bringing it back round to Hearts, as we should do, Cal 6 mentions Shankland is due a goal. It's happening on Sunday. I said this after the game last night. I was like, kind of glad Shankland didn't score, because he did everything but score last night with like Fabiano. Watching that, it's a save that gets better every time I watch it. He had a couple of efforts that were that went quite close or were half decent, kind of decent chances. But part of me just thinking, if he's going to, he's getting closer and closer, and he's obviously clearly desperate to score a goal. And it just, like Cal says, I've just got that feeling that with him not scoring last night, there's a very, very good chance he's popping up with his record against Hibs as well, that he's going to potentially be, probably hopefully will be the match winner. Yeah,
I would agree, and I think now that we've had a 2 or 3 game spell, in fact a 4 game spell where we've now scored 12 goals in 4 games, and not one of those goals is come from Shankland. So no, is it 10 goals? 10 goals.
10 goals.
Yeah, because we scored 10 goals in 4 games, and none of those goals have came from Shankland, although he's been heavily involved in some of them. I think he is hopefully now benefiting from maybe not feeling that pressure of having to do everything himself like he did last year. And hopefully that's now allowing him to find those spaces and play his own game. Obviously having the likes of Spittle and Vargas and that closer to him's helping as well. And yeah, I'm banking on him getting at least 1 or 2 at the weekend.
Right, we'll wrap it up there. Give me a prediction, Scott. What did you say last night? Did you say 2-0? 2-0 Shankland?
2-1. I had 2-1
2-1
Hearts and Shankland to get them both.
Yeah. I don't do predictions for the derby, so I'll skip that. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Scott, for joining me this afternoon to preview the derby and kind of talk the last couple of games. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, subscribing, engaging, etc., etc. Be sure to check out this website over the weekend. We've got reaction analysis from Thursday night game, and then plenty of stuff looking ahead to Sunday, including some stuff from John Robertson, which will be going out tomorrow, I think. Kai Rose and Malachi Boateng over the next couple of days as well. Be sure to check out our WhatsApp channel. If you are fed up with Twitter, I post all our content in there as well. So that's one way to get it without having to go onto Twitter. And be sure to like, subscribe, and share, I think, YouTube. But until probably Sunday, thank you very much. Have a good weekend. And hopefully the next time we're speaking, we are talking about another Heart of Midlothian win.